Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was one of the Jedi. At the start of their trip, Naruto and Jiraiya find themselves pulled into the future by an unknown force. With no way back home, and no idea what's going on, what will they do? Join the Jedi, naturally. But there are other, more sinister forces after them as well. With the Force to wield and a new group of friends, can Naruto change the future of a galaxy threatened by darkness? Welcome aboard! Chapter 5. Jiraiya had been right. Quinlan didn't like it. Not at all. And not just because of what Jiraiya told him about the realities of the shinobi, but because he didn't know how to feel about the two actual living examples he had on the ship with him. His own impressions of the two were very much at odds with what they had admitted about their culture. On the one hand, the description of the shinobi culture those two had grown up in horrified him. Using child soldiers, carrying out political assassinations, building entire villages centered around training kids to become silent killers and saboteurs. It was as if someone had taken the worst aspects of the Outer Rim and designed a culture around them. The fact that they had been Force users made it even worse. Their usage of the Force was focused almost entirely inward. They had not sensed or connected to the world around them, with rare exceptions. They mainly used their power to harm and destroy. It sounded far too close to the dark side for his comfort. He also wasn't thrilled that Jiraiya had glossed so heavily over the nastier aspects of his profession. Quinlan had gathered that Jiraiya had been a professional soldier. The man had left out the part about being part of a system that employed children as assassins from an early age. Quinlan understood the man's instinct for secrecy, but he did not appreciate it. On the other hand, Naruto and Jiraiya both struck him as being very different from the world that had created them. Jiraiya in particular had been passionate in his description of his quest to bring peace to their world by promoting understanding between people. By his expression, Naruto was an equally ardent believer in his godfather's philosophy. That philosophy resonated deeply with the Jedi Knight. It was in many ways a simplified version of the Jedi Order's own mission to uphold the peace as diplomats and mediators first, and warriors second. It formed a sharp contrast with what both of them had been called upon to do as shinobi. In addition to that, there was the fact that he just plain liked the two of them. They did not radiate with the darkness he would have expected of two former professional killers. Indeed, they both shone brightly in the light side of the Force. Naruto in particular seemed to possess very little true inner darkness. It was there, but it was buried beneath his innate kindness and desire to do good. His grief over losing his home and people was more of a temporary pall than a true innate darkness. It would pass in time, Quinlan was confident. Jiraiya had more darkness in his soul than his pupil, but he was well aware of it, and kept it firmly in check. He reminded Quinlan of some of the older Jedi Masters, the ones that had been in the field for decades. Like them, Jiraiya had a clear understanding of his own character flaws and how to control them. He was also loath to judge a primitive culture from a mere description, even a first-hand one. Jiraiya had been quite merciless in his description of his people, and Quinlan suspected he may have gone overboard somewhat. Not exaggerated per se, but perhaps left out many of the subtle nuances and silver linings that so often accompanied such brutal nations. Ultimately, Quinlan had not been there. He was seeing this from a very, very far-removed perspective. He also could not deny that there would be a certain hypocrisy in condemning the shinobi for using child soldiers when Jedi Padawans were often considered children by the standards of their race. They were not often placed in such violent situations as these shinobi had placed their genin, but they were hardly coddled either. In the end, it took Quinlan nearly 2 days of meditation and inner debate before he found an answer. He would not condemn Naruto and Jiraiya for the actions of their people. They struck him as two thoroughly decent people who had made the best of a bad situation. Whatever they may have done in the past, they deserved a fresh start. If anyone understood the importance of a fresh start, it was him, after all. When Quinlan emerged from his quarters, he immediately found Jiraiya and had a long conversation with him. He told him of his decision, but also gave him a warning. If Jiraiya abused his trust and used his skills for evil, Quinlan would personally hunt him down and bring him to justice. He then had a somewhat less intense version of the same conversation with Naruto. Ayla came to much the same conclusion as her master, though for slightly different reasons. Her friendship with Naruto, new though it was, gave her a fairly good understanding of the boy's character. She could feel the good in him. Even through the pall of his grief, it still shone like a star. She could no more believe he was evil than she could Master Yoda. Naruto was nervous at first after the truth of the shinobi world was brought to light. He was afraid that his new friend would abandon him. Ayla quickly assuaged those fears. "I won't judge you for things in your past," she said. "It's the Jedi way to judge people for who they are in the moment, and to offer redemption to those who are lost. I don't think you're a bad person, Naruto. You may have brushed the dark side before, but you found your way out again." Naruto frowned slightly at that. A question had been itching at the back of his mind for a while now, but it had never really seemed like the right time to ask. He asked it now though. "Ayla, what is the dark side?" he asked. "I've heard you and Quinlan talk about it a whole bunch, but I don't really get what it is." Now it was Ayla's turn to frown. How was she supposed to explain the concept of the dark side to someone who had never touched the Force like a Jedi before? "The dark side is the aspect of the Force that is fueled by our worst impulses," she said eventually, drawing on her own memories of the dark to guide her explanation. "When you use the Force out of fear, anger, or selfish desire, that is using the dark side. If you do that too long, eventually those become the only things you can feel. It consumes you, until you think only of your own power and wants." "So, when I used it, I was evil?" Naruto asked, sounding both confused and worried. "No," Ayla hastened to say. "You weren't evil. Using the dark side doesn't instantly make you evil, nor does being evil mean you use the dark. If you had kept going though, if you had continued to draw on your anger and hatred, eventually you would have been evil. That's the great trap of the dark side. It twists you, leading you on with promises of power, until you become someone you don't recognize, a monster." "I've been called a monster before," Naruto said quietly. "Whoever said that was wrong," Ayla said. "You aren't a monster, Naruto. I didn't think so when you drew on the Kyuubi, and I don't think so now. I'm not going to condemn you for what you contain. You shouldn't either." Naruto I smiled at her, his joy at not losing his friend shining like a beacon in the Force. She smiled back and gave him a hug. He was making progress, she mused. His grief was still powerful, and probably would be for some time, but she was confident he would be all right. And the council would help him, she would make sure of that. The second dramatic moment was, thankfully, less serious. It was actually a series of moments that came when Naruto and Jiraiya demonstrated some of the techniques they could perform using chakra. Despite having already seen some of their abilities, including a sealing scroll and a Rasengan, Ayla and Quinlan were still left astonished at some of what the shinobi could do with their odd usage of the Force. They were both able to independently confirm that what Naruto and Jiraiya called chakra was a form of Force usage, but one unlike any either had ever felt or heard of. Quinlan thought it most resembled the ways of the Machukai, with their focus on using the Force to enhance their own bodies, but taken much further. The Force was tied up within their bodies to a degree Quinlan had never thought possible, but he was not an experienced enough sensor to figure out exactly how it worked, or how to replicate it. Both he and his Padawan were fascinated by watching it, however. Ayla was especially interested in the elemental ninjutsu Jiraiya displayed. In a cleared-out room, he demonstrated a small fireball and a small Suetun jutsu. Ayla was fascinated by the ability to not only alter the physical world with this Force discipline, but also to create solid matter for a time. Quinlan found the sealing arts to be the more interesting branch of study Jiraiya demonstrated. The ability to warp space and reality using arcane symbols imbued with the Force was a legendary skill amongst the Jedi, but such knowledge had been all but lost over the millennia. To see it now, performed with such speed and ease, made Quinlan more determined than ever to convince the Jedi Council to help these two displaced shinobi find a fresh start. Alienating people with access to this knowledge would be stupid, as well as morally wrong. One major talent that Jiraiya refused to demonstrate while on the ship was summoning. When Quinlan explained the basics of how hyperspace travel worked, Jiraiya decided it would be far too risky to try and summon a toad during flight. He did not know if the summoning would be affected by the quasi-subspatial nature of hyperspace flight, but he wasn't willing to risk it. For their part, Naruto and Jiraiya were most impressed by the two Jedi's sensory abilities. Jiraiya estimated that, based on their claims regarding their powers, Ayla and Quinlan had greater sensory prowess than even the finest sensor-type shinobi. He was further impressed when he heard that their skills were not considered especially rare amongst the Jedi. As time passed and the time of their arrival on Coruscant drew closer, both groups became eager to get to the capital planet. Ayla and Quinlan were eager to share these new and exciting discoveries with the Jedi Council, as well as to see about getting their new friends help with their unique situation. Naruto and Jiraiya were equally eager to hear what the Jedi Council had to say about what had happened to them, and what would happen next. Neither truly held out hope that the Council would be able to send them home, but they were hopeful that the Jedi Order Quinlan and Ayla had told them so much about would be able to help them find a new home in the galaxy. Naruto was also excited to meet new people. The past few weeks had served to dull the ache of his loss somewhat, thanks in no small part to Ayla and Jiraiya's continued efforts to cheer him up. As such, much of his natural enthusiasm and friendliness had returned. It was a fragile thing, easily turned to melancholy, but it was a far cry from the mess he had been when he first had come aboard. The prospect of meeting a whole new group of potential friends was enough to have him nearly vibrating with anticipation. As the hour of their arrival approached, he began mentally compiling all of the questions he wanted to ask the Jedi Masters who he had heard so much about. If done properly, a ship dropping out of hyperspace is not an especially dramatic affair. There is generally a slight change in the tone of the engines, and a sense of the sudden lack of a vibration you weren't truly aware of until it stopped. Beyond that, nothing. An exciting exit from hyperspace usually means that something expensive probably needs repairing. For those aboard the unnamed Consular-class cruiser that had just dropped out of hyperspace in orbit above Coruscant, however, the event felt very dramatic indeed. It represented different things to each of them, but they all felt the same sense of relief upon arriving at the Republic capital. For Vec, it represented the end of one of the most difficult navigation challenges of his entire life. He was eager to return to his job of scouting new hyperlanes in the Outer Rim. For Quinlan and Ayla, it represented the successful completion of the most stressful mission they had been on since regaining their memories more than a year ago. It was a chance for them to return to the peace and tranquility of the temple for a time. For Naruto and Jiraiya, it represented the next step on their journey into this new, much larger world. It was also the first truly alien world either of them had ever seen, let alone visited. As it loomed large in the viewport, they both found themselves holding their breath. The planet glowed silver and orange as it hung in space. City lights seemed to form a spider web across the surface. Both of them had heard about the Ecumenopolis, but seeing it was an entirely different matter. For two people from a time when a city of 250,000 people was considered huge, seeing a city that covered an entire planet kilometer deep was rather overwhelming. After a moment spent staring at the city world, Quinlan moved over to the nearby communicator. A few buttons pressed later, and a small hologram of Yoda appeared in the air above it. "Night Voss, good to see you safe, it is." "A success your mission was?" "Yes, Master Yoda," Quinlan said respectfully. "My Padawan and I have identified the cause of the disturbance in the Force. I am transmitting my report now." Done while you have." "And yet, I sense that there is, you wish to say." "Yes, Master. I encountered two beings while on Tython. They need assistance. I believe the Council will want to speak to them immediately. It concerns my mission." Yoda was silent for a moment after that. His ears twitched back and forth slightly before he nodded. Always willing to offer help, a Jedi should be. "If so important this is, then convene the Council I shall. Your new companions, to the temple bring them." "Yes, Master." "I'll have Vec bring the ship to the temple docking bay as soon as we get clearance," Quinlan said, before ending the transmission. Even with their Jedi clearance codes, it still took the better part of an hour for Quinlan to get approval to land. Coruscant had the busiest skies in the galaxy, after all. An hour-long wait was actually considered fairly quick for a non-emergency request. As such, by the time they landed at the temple docking bay, someone had already arrived to greet them. "Return to us, the brave explorers have." Master Yaddle," Quinlan said with shock. "I did not expect to see you here. I had heard you were with Kenobi and Skywalker on Mawan." "There, I was," Yaddle said. "Here, I am now." Before she could say anything further, her attention shifted behind Quinlan. There Naruto and Jiraiya stood in silence, looking around with barely concealed awe. Over the 4-week journey from Tython, the pain of their loss had subsided a little. Enough for them to begin to take in the wonders this new future offered, rather than dwell only on the things it no longer held. Everywhere they glanced there was some new ship, or some strange alien they had only seen pictures of from Teach's archives. They recognized some of them, a Rodian, a Togruta, and a few Duros. Others were a mystery to them. They at least recognized Master Yaddle. Jiraiya had asked to know who exactly was on the Jedi Council they were meeting, and Quinlan had agreed to tell him. Naruto had been encouraged to memorize their faces and names as well. Their gawking was interrupted by Ayla, whose path they had inadvertently blocked. She smirked at their dumbfounded expressions, before giving both of them a sharp prod in the ribs. "Gah!" Naruto yelped. "Ayla, what was that for? So, you two would stop just standing there and go greet Master Yaddle. You shouldn't keep her waiting. And remember to speak basic." Pouting somewhat beneath his mask, Naruto walked down the ramp, Jiraiya close behind him. When he reached the bottom he gave a small bow, remembering the extensive lecture Jiraiya had given him on manners after the incident with Fukasaku. "Hello Master Yaddle," he said in heavily accented basic. "My name Naruto, and this Jiraiya." They had decided before landing that Naruto would handle introductions. His occasional lack of manners aside, he was somewhat better at speaking basic than his godfather. Yaddle noticed the masked boy's thick accent and slightly stilted words. "Fluent in basic you are not," she said kindly. "Translate for you I will, so you may speak freely." "Teach say practice as much as can," Naruto replied, before wincing. That had definitely not been polite. Still, Yaddle only chuckled a little. A good thing, practice is. But now is not the time for it. A day for doing, today is. Now, to the council chambers we must go." With that she turned and walked off, gesturing for them to follow her. Naruto decided that he liked the strange little green lady, and eagerly rushed to catch up with her. Drawing level with her, he began to ask some of the seemingly endless questions that sprang to his mind. The rest of the group could only watch with a mix of embarrassed amusement as he interrogated the kind Jedi Master. Yaddle herself found the rapid-fire questioning endearing. She answered each as best she could, and watched as the masked boy's eyes seemed to shine with delight as he slaked his curiosity. His presence in the Force was like a storm of positivity. It swirled and crackled with uncontrolled happiness and a strong sense of hope. Beneath it, though, Yaddle could sense pain. He was mourning a great loss, and he was afraid of what came next. Understandable, if Quinlan's report was accurate. Many Jedi would look down on such raw emotion, but Yaddle took a different view. Grief and fear were perfectly natural responses to what this child had been through. He was not letting them control him though, at least not now. His sparkling eyes and almost glowing optimism told her that. Besides, the boy had not received Jedi training, it would be unfair to judge him by Jedi standards. As she satisfied Naruto's curiosity, Yaddle examined his presence in the Force more deeply. She could sense the strangely tangled nature of the Force within his body, much as Voss had reported, but she was able to discern more than him. She could feel that the Force was somehow being integrated directly into his body's own organic energies, though she could not say to what extent. She would need to ask Yoda to look into it. She also looked for any trace of the dark side in Naruto's presence, particularly this Kyuubi being that was supposedly sealed within him. To her immense relief, she found only slight traces consistent with the accidental brush he had had with the dark side a month ago. There was an interesting knot of Force energy in his abdomen, presumably the seal Quinlan had reported, but it seemed a nigh impenetrable barrier. She could feel nothing of what was inside it, and only the tiny spurts of raw Force power that it emitted every few seconds gave an indication of what it might contain. When Yaddle had first read Quinlan's report an hour ago, she had been intensely curious about these newcomers. To her, they represented a chance to revitalize the Jedi Order, and perhaps correct what she saw as mistakes they had made in the past. In recent decades, Yaddle had begun to see a worrying trend in the Order, a trend towards rigidity and arrogance that did not sit well with her. Qui-Gon's death, and Dooku's subsequent departure, had driven home for her the need for change. She had been stymied in her attempts up to now, but perhaps these two would provide her with the chance she needed. Eventually, during one of the breaks in the constant stream of questions, she asked one of her own. "Your mask, why wear it do you?" Naruto paused for a moment, and the light in his eyes dimmed a bit. Clearly this topic brought up some painful memories. Still, Yaddle waited patiently for an answer. She had already asked the question, and trying to take it back now would be both pointless and embarrassing for the boy. I wear it to honor one of my first teachers, Naruto said eventually. He always used to wear one. He said it was a tradition in his clan. When he gave me this, he said he believed I was worthy of representing him and his clan out in the world. A heavy burden, for one so young, that is, Yaddle said. I can handle it, Naruto said defensively, before looking away, embarrassed at having been rude again. Sorry. It's just not a lot of people believed in me back in my village. But Kakashi-sensei always did. He taught me a lot, and I want to honor that and remember his lessons. Apology accepted, Yaddle said calmly. Wisdom there is in your words, young Naruto. But care you should take, that hold you back the past does not. Serve as the soil you grow in, it should, not as weights tied around your neck. Naruto didn't know what to make of that. He thought Yaddle might be saying something important, but he had no idea what it meant. Dismissing it from his mind, he resumed his questions. They continued, unabated, until Yaddle stopped them outside the door to the council chambers. Arrived we have. Ready, are you? She asked. Naruto looked back at Jiraiya. The sage stepped forward and put his hand on his godson's shoulder, giving him a reassuring squeeze. We're ready, he said. There was no point in delaying things. The only way to go was forward. Nodding, Yaddle opened the door and led them into the council chamber. She swiftly crossed the room and took her usual seat across from the door. The rest of them stood in the center of the ring of chairs, waiting to be addressed. They didn't have to wait long. As soon as Yaddle had gotten situated, Mace Windu began to speak. Before we begin, the formidable master said, is there anything you would like to add to your report, Quinlan? It seemed to be missing several key details, I assume deliberately. Yes, master, I left out two things, Quinlan replied. The first were the names of my companions here. This is Naruto Uzumaki and his godfather Jiraiya. They were involved in the disturbance we all felt. They are also the two whom I told Master Yoda needed the Order's help. And what manner of help do they require? Asked Pielo-kun. The Keldor master leaned forward in his chair, examining the two shinobi. That leads into the second thing I left out of my report, Master Pielo, said Quinlan. The means by which these two ended up on Tython. So far as I can tell, they traveled forward through time from 50,000 years ago. A surprised mutter ran through the room at that. Pielo-kun leaned back, and several of the masters frowned. Even Peel let out a surprised cough. Mace Windu merely stared flatly at Voss, skepticism written in every line of his face. Time travel, he said. How exactly did you come to that conclusion? Quinlan had been ready for that question, though. He told the council the entirety of Naruto and Jiraiya's story. The two shinobi chimed in regularly, clarifying aspects of their history and culture. Everything from their past actions as shinobi, to their experience being pulled into the future, to the tachyon scans Archie had taken. At that last one, he produced a copy of the scan results from his robe, passing them to Master Ethkoth for inspection. Another science droid was summoned to the tower, where it performed the scans again to verify the results. All the while, Yoda sat silently in his chair, staring at the two shinobi as if deep in thought. He was only shaken out of his reverie when Master Koth somewhat astonishingly declared both sets of scans as identical. The two were most definitely from the past. Most unusual this is. What help was it that this council would provide, did you hope? It took Jiraiya a second to decipher Yoda's unusual speech patterns, but Naruto had grown used to them during the walk with Yaddle. As such, he spoke up first. Can you send us back? He asked. Please, we just want to go home. Yoda very slowly shook his head. Sorry, I am, for your plight. But a way to send you back, there is not, he answered sadly. He could see some disappointment in the boy's eyes, but no shock. It seemed Naruto had been prepared for such an answer. We have only fragmented rumors and speculation on time travel, Yariel Poof said. The journals of Nasdurl mention stories of ancient devices for such, but only says that they had long since been lost or destroyed by his time. I see, Jiraiya said as he placed a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder. Thank you, for at least hearing us out, I suppose. I believe it is time someone addressed the biggest concern in your report, Depa Bailaba said. This dark side entity that is supposedly sealed into the boy. Please, tell us more about that. In this, Quinlan deferred to Naruto and Jiraiya. They told the tale of what the Kyuubi was, how it came to be sealed into Naruto, and the various risks and benefits it carried. Quinlan and Ayla chimed in with their own experiences and impressions from time to time, giving their thoughts on the matter. Most unusual this is, Yoda said. Allow me, will you, to examine this seal? Curious I am, how such a thing works. Jiraiya glanced down at Naruto, who shrugged. He didn't know what risks might be involved, so he was leaving it up to his godfather. So long as I can monitor what you're doing, I suppose that would be fine, Jiraiya said cautiously. But if I tell you to stop what you're doing, you will stop. Or I will stop you. Understood. Several of the masters bristled at Jiraiya's threatening tone, but Yoda merely nodded his agreement. There had been no true malice behind the words. Just protectiveness, and a genuine concern for everyone's safety. The old master watched intently as Naruto exposed his stomach and seemed to concentrate. He felt the force move in a very strange way, and then an intricate design faded into view across the boy's abdomen. Yoda spent several minutes examining the seal, both with his eyes and with his force senses. He felt much the same thing that Yaddle had, an impenetrable web of the force, regularly emitting small bursts of power into the boy's own force presence. Finally, after nearly 10 minutes of examination, Yoda pulled back. Understand this seal fully, I do not, he said. But secure it is. Very secure. Are you truly suggesting we just leave such an entity in the boy? Tien said, clearly shocked at the idea. Read the report, you did, yes? Yaddle asked, a bit sharply. Removing this Kyuubi, kill Naruto it would. Felt the seal myself, I did as well. Agree with Yoda, I do. In this case, doing nothing, the safest path it is. Tien lapsed into silence at that. He may not have liked the idea of leaving such dangerous power in the hands of a child, but he was hardly going to advocate killing the boy just to satisfy his concerns. Only Mace noticed how Jiraiya had subtly tensed when Tien had made his comment, as well as how he had relaxed when Yaddle had responded. Clearly the man was highly protective of his godson, as well as quite confident in his skills to be ready to fight the full council. Reaching out with his own senses, Mace could see why. Jiraiya was immensely powerful, with a calm, controlled assuredness about him that spoke to a commensurate level of skill. Clearly, this was not a man to trifle with, Mace thought. He was shaken from his thoughts by Jiraiya's voice. Is that it, or did you have more questions? He asked. I would be interested in seeing some of your abilities with the Force, Yariel Poof said, much to general agreement. From the report, they sound quite fascinating. Jiraiya was somewhat impatient with this, but Naruto was never one to avoid a chance to show off what he could do. As such, they spent most of the next 2 hours giving demonstrations and answering questions on their powers. Much like with Quinlan, the council seemed most interested in Jiraiya's skill in sealing. It seemed that was one of the few skills the Jedi did not have even a vague analog for, at least not anymore. The other bit that the council found particularly fascinating was when Jiraiya had Naruto summon Gamakichi. The young toad seemed to take the new environment in stride, though he was somewhat stunned at seeing so many alien species. Mace and Yoda found the concept of a summoning contract rather disturbing at first, worrying that it may be some form of slavery. A swift conversation with Gamakichi served to dispel those worries though. Jiraiya was just glad that he hadn't had to summon Shima or Fukasaku. He did not yet trust the Jedi so much he would show all of his trump cards. Finally, after a long series of questions, Yoda decided he had seen enough. Thank you for your patience with us, I do, he said. Tired and hungry you must be. Escort you to a dining hall, Padawan Sakura will. Your situation, difficult it is. Debate we will, on how best to help you. Signal you we will when options for you, we have. Decide on what you wish to do, then you will. Jiraiya wasn't thrilled with the thought of not being present when the council was debating, but he wasn't about to make a stink about it. For one, he was hungry, and so was Naruto. For another, he understood them not wanting to talk about their fate with them in the room. So, he simply inclined his head respectfully, and guided Naruto out of the room behind Ayla. As the door closed once more, Yoda turned to Quinlan. Your opinion of them, what is it? The old master asked. I think they're good people, Quinlan said immediately. They come from a culture of spies and assassins, CC Tyan objected. They even admitted to multiple crimes under Republic law. But they weren't under Republic law, Master Tyan, Quinlan protested. I'm not defending their culture, but both of them were adamant that they were trying to change the system and bring peace to their world. And you believe this, do you? Tyan asked, his voice somewhat disdainful. Yes, I do. I am very good at knowing when I am being lied to. Neither of them was lying to me. Do you doubt my skills, or is it my word you don't believe? Enough, Yoda said sharply. In doubt, neither your skills nor honesty are, Night Voss. In your report, you mentioned the boys tapped into the dark side during the battle. That led him to nearly losing himself to this QB he has sealed in him, Depa Bailaba said. You stand by your assessment, even after that display? I do, Voss replied. My Padawan and I are living proof that a brush with the dark side does not automatically corrupt you. Naruto had just lost his entire world, and was then thrown into a battle. How can we judge him for acting out of anger when he was never taught a different way? Neither of them were ever given Jedi training. From the report, it says the boy regained control as soon as he woke up, and immediately saved Padawan Sakura's life, Ithkoth said. He also expressed regret for his loss of control, and determination never to allow it to happen again. I believe Quinlan's assessment of his character is accurate. Padawan Sakura is perhaps the best empath currently in the Order, Adi Gallia said. She also has more experience with the dark side than even most of us here. If she says that Naruto was not tainted by his brush with the darkness, then I do not believe we should doubt her. Agree also, I do, Yoda said. Sense them both we all did. Not evil were they. Hurt and mourning, yes. But evil? This I do not believe. That will be all, Night Voss, Mace Windu said. You may join your Padawan to eat. Quinlan bowed and walked out of the room. He knew he was being dismissed so that he would not get into another argument with Tyan. Even so, he was grateful that Yoda had backed him up. It was nice to know that the wise Grandmaster had faith in him. It was also nice to be allowed to eat. He was starving. I agree with Night Voss, said Plo-kun when the door had closed, surprising many there. The Keldor Master was known for his strict, almost black and white view of justice. They have broken no Republic laws, he continued. We have no authority to punish them for things that happened 50,000 years ago. They struck me as good people making the best of the world they had. I believe we should give them a chance to make the best of this one as well. There was a general nodding of agreement to this. Even CC Tyan reluctantly conceded the point. If Plo-kun was willing to look past their actions as shinobi, then he felt he could too. The issue of their character aside, we still have the question of what to do with them, Mace Windu said. We cannot simply give them transport and send them on their way, said Yariel Poof. They know nearly nothing of the galaxy. They would starve, or else be forced into crime. There is also the matter of their powers, said Adi Gallia. They both are powerful force users, with highly unusual abilities. If the Sith were to somehow capture them, those abilities could be used against us, or worse, the Republic. That isn't even touching on what might happen if that entity gets free. Their powers could also be of great value to the Republic, Poof responded. There are dark days ahead, and some of their techniques could save many lives if used properly. Indeed, Yoda said. Important to the future, both of them are. See them in my vision, I did. Allow them to fall to the Sith, we cannot. Not just for their sakes, but for the whole Republic. Unending darkness I sense if the Sith gain control of them. There was a long pause after that. All of the masters contemplated the problem at hand. It was after nearly 5 minutes of silence that Yaddle spoke up. If into Sith hands we cannot let them fall, then a solution I may have, she said slowly. What do you suggest? Asked Mace. Train them as Jedi, we could. Teach them how to use the Force, how to recognize the dark we could. Strong are they in the Force? The boy especially. If into the Order we bring them, then away from the Sith they would be. Her suggestion was met with a number of reactions. Most present dismissed it almost instantly. Plo-kun and Yariel Poof were unreadable. Mace was frowning slightly, but did not immediately nix the idea. Yoda, however, looked contemplative. "They are too old," said Tyon. "And the boy is far too emotional. Training them would risk them falling to the dark side," added Oppo Rancisis. "Always present, that risk is, for every being we train," retorted Yaddle. "No different are these two. As to their age, too old was Skywalker. Too old was I, too old was Yoda. Too much weight to age, this order gives. We would still be giving them dangerous skills. If they were to fall." Peel trailed off. "They already have dangerous skills," said Plo-kun. "By Quinlan's report, Jiraiya would be a match for most of us here. Naruto is already the equal of many Padawans. Training them would not make them more of a threat than they could already become. It would merely show them a different path." "It sounds as if you are actually considering this," Tyon said, shocked. "Think of the damage they could do if they fell." "Think of the damage they could do now," Plo responded. "At the very least, training them as Jedi would let them recognize the dark side and avoid it." While the council continued to debate the idea back and forth, Yoda and Mace stayed silent, both deep in contemplation. Yoda was thinking on his vision. The two shinobi were vitally important to the future of both the Jedi Order and the Republic. That much he was certain of. Their arrival had already changed things. Yaddle's suggestion, however, flew in the face of every tradition the Jedi had established in the last 1,000 years. Naruto, and most certainly Jiraiya, were far too old to be trained. They were emotional and attached, and their jutsu flirted with the dark side. Despite this, the image of young Skywalker sprang unbidden to his mind. That boy also had been too old, too emotional, too attached. He had been filled with fear and anger, both paths to the dark side. Yet Kagan had supported him until his last breath, and now look. 6 years later, and the boy had become a passable Padawan, no closer to falling than he had been at the age of 9. Indeed, he seemed determined to stay in the light, and had a promising future ahead of him. His training was far from complete, but if Yoda was being honest with himself, he was progressing very well. Had he been wrong to oppose Skywalker's training? Yoda found himself reluctant to admit the possibility, but it seemed unavoidable. As he re-examined his decisions, he found something he did not like. Fear. Fear and pride. The same emotions he had so often criticized Skywalker for, he found within himself now. When had those crept in? The fear of taking even the slightest risk on a potentially promising child, and the pride keeping him from admitting his mistake, even to himself. It seemed some serious self-reflection was in order. He suspected he would not entirely like what he found. Putting that aside for the moment, he tried to catch a glimpse of the future. The dark side had yet to fully return to its previous levels, so he was optimistic of seeing at least something. It was murky, but after a few patient minutes, he was able to discern a sense of rightness, of light even, around the idea of bringing Naruto and Jiraiya into the Jedi Order. He would need to meditate for a clearer glimpse, but the brief sensation was enough for now. Mace, meanwhile, was thinking about Naruto. He had never seen so many shatter points clustered around a single being before. They clung to the boy so thick they were like a fog. Whatever he did in the future, Mace was sure he would change the galaxy. Mace very much wanted to ensure that that change was a positive one. That wasn't the biggest thing that interested him about the boy, though. What truly had him thinking was what he had felt when he first sensed Naruto's force presence. He had felt it call out to him, and he had felt his own power respond. It was a sensation Mace had felt several times before, but one he had never imagined he would feel with someone like Naruto. It had been the beginning of a Padawan bond. The Force, it seemed, was pushing him to take the boy as his apprentice. Mace normally did his best to follow the will of the Force, but here there was a problem. Naruto was not a Jedi initiate. He was not eligible to be taken as a Padawan. And yet, here was Yaddle, a being whose wisdom he felt was equaled only by Yoda's, suggesting that the boy and his godfather be trained as Jedi, in violation of all tradition. The Force had never led Mace astray, not once. He did not believe it was even possible for it to lead him astray, and he did not believe it was leading him astray now. This path was risky, he knew that, but the Koran Jedi was hardly a stranger to risk. His mind made up, he traded a significant glance with Yoda. It was time to make their opinion known to the council. Agree with Master Yaddle, I do, said Yoda, silencing the ongoing debate. Too much weight on age, this council puts. Too risky, you say it is. Too dangerous. Ruled by our fear, are we? But Master, you opposed Anakin Skywalker being trained, Oppo Rancisis pointed out. Wrong was I to do so. A powerful Jedi, Skywalker is shaping up to be. Emotional, yes. Unconventional, yes. But many great Jedi, unconventional they have been. Judge him too harshly than I did. Let my fear rule me, I did. Allow it to rule me now, I will not, Yoda said emphatically. I also agree with Master Yaddle, Mace broke in. The Force wills that I should take Naruto as my Padawan learner. The boy is surrounded by Shatterpoints. His destiny will likely shape the Republic. I would see that that destiny is guided by the Jedi rather than the Sith. While searching the Force for guidance, a sense I received, that the right path this is. Serve the will of the Force, this action would, Yoda said. Training those two would go against all our traditions. Traditions that have served us for 1,000 years, Taiyan protested. And yet the Sith have returned, said Yariel Poof. They have lurked unseen beneath our noses for all of those 1,000 years, causing who knows how much pain and suffering. Now, they feel confident enough to act openly, revealing their existence. So, have those traditions truly served us well? Or have they, perhaps, blinded us? The Ruzan reform was 1,000 years ago. Even if it was the right decision at the time, are we truly going to act as if we need never change again? That strikes me as a road to destruction. There was silence at that. None of the masters knew how to answer those questions. The idea of 1,000 years of tradition having been a mistake was not something any of them wished to consider. Still, the facts Yariel brought up sat there like mountains, tough to ignore, and difficult to get around. Finally, after several minutes of quiet pondering, Mace broke the silence. Let us put it to a vote, he said. Further debate will get us nowhere. One by one the masters cast their vote as to whether or not the two time travelers would be trained. In the end, only CC Taiyan, Even Peel, and Oppo Rancisis voted nay. The result was clear. Naruto and Jiraiya would be offered a chance to become Jedi. Now the only issue left to debate was how to go about doing that. Chapter 6. Naruto and Jiraiya had long since finished eating by the time the council contacted Quinlan to summon them. Quinlan had joined them halfway through the meal, before offering to give them a tour. He had been showing them around some of the more famous parts of the temple. They were in the room of 1,000 fountains when the call came across her communicator. A few minutes later, the group of four stood outside the council chambers. Do you know what they decided? Asked Jiraiya. Not yet, he responded. They'll want to tell you two first. Whatever it was, they certainly took a long time debating. Jiraiya wasn't sure how to feel about that. It could mean that their problem was especially complicated and required a nuanced response. It could also mean that the council wasn't fully on board with helping them. All he could do was hope for the former. Come on, what are we waiting for? Naruto asked impatiently. Let's quit standing around and go in there already. Jiraiya shook his head at Naruto's impatience. Nevertheless, he had a point. Standing around accomplished nothing. So, bracing himself for potentially bad news, he opened the doors and strode into the center of the council chamber. Naruto, Quinlan, and Ayla followed closely behind him. Thank you for coming, Mace Windu began. This council has reached a decision regarding your situation. We have an offer we would like you to consider. What sort of offer? Asked Jiraiya. We would like for you and Naruto to join the Jedi Order, Mace replied, his face inscrutable. Jiraiya felt Quinlan stiffen behind him. Ayla actually gasped in shock. Clearly this wasn't the sort of offer that was made every day. We are offering you a home here, with us, as well as the chance to learn how to continue your quest for peace in the galaxy of today, Mace continued. That got Jiraiya's attention for sure. He had been heartened to hear of the Jedi when Quintana had first described them. They had seemed to mirror many of his own ideas and goals. The chance to be a part of that was undeniably alluring. Quinlan said we were too old to be Jedi, Naruto said, confused. He had asked the Kiffer Knight about becoming a Jedi on the trip from Tython. It had sounded like a pretty awesome thing to do, but Quinlan had been quick to break the bad news to him. According to him, only infants and young toddlers were accepted for training. Even so, there was no mistaking the tone of hope that colored Naruto's voice, nor the feeling of it in his Force signature. Clearly, the offer of a home had grabbed his attention. Traditionally, you would be. In this case, however, certain circumstances have convinced us that a certain flexibility would be appropriate, Mace replied. Judging by the slightly uncomfortable shifting of some of the masters, Jiraiya noticed that decision had not been unanimous. That, however, was not what concerned him regarding that statement. What circumstances would those be, he asked. He wanted to be sure of all the angles before he even considered accepting this offer. Your abilities with Force, concerning they are, Yoda answered. Dangerous could they be in the wrong hands. Other groups take advantage of your skills, they would use them against the Republic. Avoid this, we wish to. Understand, this offer is not made lightly, Mace said. If you accept it, we will be placing a great deal of faith in you. Jiraiya nodded at that. He was, ironically, comforted that Yoda had admitted they weren't making this offer solely out of the goodness of their hearts. The fact they were willing to be honest and admit that it was in part a tactical decision told him the Jedi were already extending Naruto and him a lot of trust. He was grateful to them for that, but he wasn't the only one affected by this decision. What do you think, Naruto? He asked, looking at his godson. I'm willing to take them up on this, but only if you are too. Naruto was quiet for a long time. Internally, a debate was raging inside his head. On the one hand, he was thrilled by the offer. If he couldn't go home, then being a Jedi struck him as the next best thing. He would get to go around the galaxy, see new worlds, and make a ton of new friends. He may not have been able to be Hokage anymore, but this way he could still find a way to protect his precious people. On the other hand, there was the Kyuubi. He knew that Yoda and the others had convinced themselves the seal was secure, but that didn't lessen the danger. He had nearly given in to the monster inside him once, who was to say it wouldn't happen again? The last thing he wanted was to put people at risk who weren't prepared to deal with something like that. What about the Kyuubi? Naruto asked, giving voice to his private doubts. What if I lose control again? HRRM, a danger the Kyuubi may be, but allow fear to rule us, we cannot, Yoda said. Examine the seal. I did. Secure it was. If weaken it does, then maintain it. Jiraiya can, yes? Yes, I can do that, Jiraiya said, keeping his shock off his face. How had Yoda figured out he could alter and reinforce the seal? Deny you a chance to live a full life because of your burden, we will not, Yaddle said kindly. Deny yourself you should not either. A powerful Force entity, this Kyuubi sounds like, Yoda said. Into the archives I will look, for more information on such things. Monitor the situation we will, but stand our offer does. Accept it, do you? Naruto's eyes went wide when he heard that. A huge grin broke out across his face under his mask, and he had to catch himself before he literally jumped for joy. Yes, he said. Just you watch. I'll become the best Jedi ever. A good thing to have, a goal is, Yoda said with a chuckle. But many steps along your journey there will be. For now, ready to be Padawans, you two are not. Much you have to learn about the galaxy before that. Then what'll we be doing if we aren't Padawans? Naruto asked. We have decided that for the next year, you two will be given an education here, at the temple, Mace said. Naruto, you will be joining some of our initiate classes to learn galactic history, basic engineering, and other essential skills. Jiraiya, you will be given a similar education by Master Yoda and Master Plo-kun. Additionally, Master Yoda will be teaching the two of you how to use the Force as we Jedi do. At the end of that year, if we deem you ready, then you may become Padawans. For now, Master Plo will take you where you need to be. There is one other thing, Plo spoke up. Knowledge of how you arrived in this time should be kept restricted. For now, we will tell others that you were held in stasis for all those years. Such technology exists today and has for over 100,000 years. It will draw little comment. Both Naruto and Jiraiya agreed to that, once the concept of stasis was explained to them. It seemed a reasonable precaution to not bandy about knowledge of time travel. What about the Kyuubi? Naruto asked again. What should I say about that? Nothing, Mace said this time. Until we know more about that being, it would be best if you told no one about it at all. To do so would attract the very attention we hope to avoid. Naruto frowned, but reluctantly agreed. He did not like the idea of starting off his time as a Jedi with a lie. Lies had played far too prominent a role in his life up to this point, and he was truly sick of them. Nevertheless, he was a trained shinobi, and he understood the need for certain dangerous facts to be kept a secret. There weren't many facts more dangerous than the truth of what he had sealed in his stomach, so, for now, he would agree to the deception. He promised himself, though, that it would not last forever. Eventually, he would make it so he did not have to live in fear of the Kyuubi. Somehow. With that, the meeting was over. The Keldor Jedi walked over to two former shinobi and introduced himself. Excited once more by the prospect of being a Jedi, Naruto immediately began to ask questions of him, much as he had of Yaddle several hours earlier. The excited sounds of his voice faded down the hall as PLO-kun led them away, with most of the other council members filing out soon afterwards. Eventually, only Yoda and Yaddle were left in the room. A deeper reason you had for suggesting this than precaution against the Sith, Yoda said. It wasn't a question, but neither was it censorious. Yoda had known Yaddle for centuries. At times, her perception of the will of the Force exceeded even his own. He strongly suspected this was one of those times. Too rigid the Jedi have become, too cautious, Yaddle stated calmly, nodding. Nearly turned away young Skywalker we did, out of fear. The old ways allowed the Sith to return they have. Blinded by our love of tradition, we have become, perhaps. More to this though, I sense there is. Yaddle nodded, her face turning serious. On my mission to Mawan, died I should have. Killed by Granta Omega's bioweapon. When the disturbance occurred, a vision of this I had. Able to prevent it I was, but more to the vision was there. Saw much darkness I did, but also light. At the center of the light, those two. The will of the Force it is, that become Jedi they should. Yoda listened to this thoughtfully. He had also had visions of darkness coming, but he had not seen that it was Naruto and Jiraiya who would oppose it. He had seen them in his vision, though, and had received no feelings of danger or enmity. He also, if reluctantly, agreed with Yaddle that the Jedi had failed to detect the Sith for 1,000 years. Their traditions had failed them in that. He would have to meditate further on what else they may have failed upon. It seemed the time had come for the self-examination he had resolved upon earlier. The first thing PLO-kun had done, once he had weathered the storm of Naruto's curiosity, was get both of the new Jedi trainees some more appropriate clothing. Jiraiya selected a set of standard Jedi robes, keeping only his horned forehead protector from his old gear. The rest he sealed into a scroll, much to PLO's curiosity. Naruto was somewhat more reluctant to part with his shinobi gear, as much of it held deep personal significance for him. In the end he donned a Jedi tunic and boots, but kept the flak vest, mask, glove, bracers, and forehead protector. He also kept the mesh armor, wearing it beneath his tunic. PLO-kun was somewhat nonplussed by his non-traditional outfit, but he said nothing. Jedi were not actually required to wear the classic brown robes. They were allowed culturally significant clothing, and that was technically what Naruto was keeping. Next, Jiraiya was shown to his quarters. As he was a full adult, he would not be staying with the other initiates. Instead, he had been provided with a small room, complete with a refresher unit and kitchen. He would stay there until he was taken as a Padawan. This arrangement caused some dispute with Naruto. I still don't get why I can't stay with him. Naruto asked for the third time. As I have said before, you have been assigned to the Clawmouse clan. You will be sharing most of their classes, so the council decided it would be best for you to live with them as well, PLO-kun replied with commendable patience. Think of it as a chance to make friends close to your own age. Naruto perked up slightly at that. He missed his old friends dearly. The chance to make new bonds with people lifted his spirits a bit. The Clawmouse clan creche was located deep within the temple, and the sun was beginning to set by the time they had reached it. As they walked in, Naruto looked around, taking in the details of what was to be his new home. The creche was divided into two main sleeping halls, with boys on the left and girls on the right. In the center was a mid-sized common area, where the clan could study and spend whatever free time they had. Off to one side was the instructor's quarters and office, where the primary instructor of the clan lived while overseeing their education. Spread out among the chairs in the common area were a dozen or so younglings of various species. They seemed to range in age from Naruto's age to perhaps a year or two younger. "Younglings, gather round," PLO-kun said. This was followed by the muted thumping of small feet as the younglings quickly formed into a semicircle around Naruto and the Jedi Master. "This is Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "He will be joining this clan. He has just been admitted for training by the council, so he will have a little catching up to do. Nevertheless, I expect you all to welcome him into your clan and provide him with whatever help he needs. He is one of you now. Any questions?" A series of hands flew into the air. Out of the sudden forest of waving arms, PLO selected one Maryland girl. "Yes, young lady. Tell us your name first." "My name is Barasafi. I was wondering, how did he come to be admitted to the temple?" "Isn't he too old?" she asked. "That is an excellent question, Baras. I am afraid, however, that is not something I can share. Only Naruto can choose to tell you of his origins." At that, the crowd of younglings turned their attention to Naruto. He felt somewhat nervous. He hadn't had so much curiosity pointed at him in a while. There was a moment's silence, followed by an eruption of noise as each clan member tried to ask their questions. Naruto was soon overwhelmed by the flood of inquisitive young initiates. PLO-kun chuckled to himself as he walked to the instructor's office to inform her of the situation. The council had decided that the two former shinobi would have the right to choose who they told their past to, or the modified version of it that the council had approved, at least. Taiyan and Peel had wanted the truth of their time as shinobi classified, but in the end it was deemed unnecessary. The fact that they had time traveled was one thing, but disguising their skills as ninja would have been impossible. Besides, there were many small, isolated, force-wielding warrior sects that no one had ever heard of. That there had been such in the distant past would surprise no one at all. By the time PLO-kun had finished filling the instructor in on all the facts about her new charge, Naruto had managed to tell his story to the assembled younglings. It had hurt to recall his lost home, but Jiraiya had told him it would get easier telling people every time he did it. Naruto didn't want to hide from his grief anymore anyways. He had left out only the part about the Kyuubi. He still wasn't thrilled about not telling his new compatriots, but he understood the need for security around such a dangerous secret. After checking that Naruto was settled, and confirming, much to general astonishment, that his story was true, PLO-kun left the creche. Shortly afterwards, the clan instructor came out to meet the newcomer. "Hello Naruto, my name is Max Leem. I am the primary instructor of the Clawmouse clan. Do you have any?" She trailed off when she noticed Naruto staring at her with some shock. "Is something wrong, Naruto? Well, what are you? I mean, what species are you?" Naruto asked. Max blinked at the unintentional rudeness of the question. It seemed a few lessons on manners would not go amiss. Still, he was from a primitive culture, she remembered. "I am a Gran, Naruto. And it is better to say that you do not recognize someone's species than to ask such a blunt question," she remonstrated gently. "Oh. Sorry about that. I'm still learning basic, so I didn't know how to phrase it," Naruto said as he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "That's alright, Naruto. You know now. Why don't you spend some time getting to know your new clanmates? You will be spending a lot of time with them after all," she suggested. Naruto nodded at that, and walked over to the group of younglings again. One of them, a Togruta girl he recognized, walked over to him. Her orange skin immediately caught his eye. How awesome was that? Here he was, not allowed to wear any orange, and she just got to be born with the most amazing color ever as part of her body. Talk about unfair. "Hi there," she said. "My name's Ahsoka Tano." "Hi," he said. I really like your skin color." Okay," she said, confused. "Wait, are you making fun of me? Because you better not be." As she said that, she stepped forward menacingly, and she gave him a glare that would have impressed a Hyuga. Naruto yelped a bit and waved his arms, desperately searching for the words to keep this girl from trying to hit him. No. I promise I wasn't. I was just arg. I'm not all the way fluent in basic yet, so I kinda just winged it. Orange is my favorite color. It's awesome. Please don't hit me, he stammered out. It didn't matter that this girl was nearly 2 years younger and 7 centimeters shorter than him. She was still an angry female, and Naruto knew to fear such beings. Satisfied that she had made her point, Ahsoka backed off a little. The boy didn't seem to have been teasing her. She was also secretly pleased that someone thought something about her was so great, even if he did have a weird way of saying it. Alright. I'm not gonna hit you, geez. Anyway, I had a question for you. Why do you wear that mask? I do it to honor one of my old teachers, Naruto answered her. He hoped she wouldn't press for more details on that. It was still a raw wound. Okay, she said. What's underneath it then? Naruto's eyes brightened when he heard that. His mind flashed back to when his team had asked Kakashi the same question, and what the result had been. Glancing around, he saw that several other clan members were already paying attention to them. He could do it, but he would have to build some suspense first. His plan in mind, he focused back on Ahsoka. If you want to know, you'll have to get it off of me, he smirked. Oh yeah, she said. Well, in that case, dash. She lunged at him suddenly, her fingers grasping for his face. He dodged to the side, before vaulting over her head and landing behind her. Grinning, Ahsoka turned around and pointed at him. Get him, she said, delighted at the chance to run around. Get his mask off. With that, a sort of free-for-all began. The members of the Clawmouse clan all gave chase, determined to get his mask. Naruto was no easy target, though. He ducked, flipped, weaved, and generally danced around them all. He was faster than them, and far more experienced with such things. As he rolled under the outstretched hand of a male Twi'lek before doing a handspring over the heads of Barris and a human girl he didn't know yet, Max Lean came out of her office. She had heard the sudden commotion and, like anyone who has spent more than 10 seconds around children, figured it spelled trouble. She had not been expecting to find most of her charges enthusiastically trying to chase down and catch the new boy. Nor was she expecting said new boy to be evading said charges by way of some highly advanced acrobatics for someone his age. Younglings, stop this at once, she yelled. The whole of the Clawmouse clan froze instantly. A general aura of nervous guilt seemed to spread across the room like an oil slick. Only Naruto looked unrepentant. What on earth is the meaning of this? Max demanded. Why were you chasing young Naruto here? We were just trying to get his mask off, the human girl said. And why, Vire, was this so important that you had to cause such a ruckus? What do you think he is under there? The Grand Jedi asked. Do you want to see? Naruto piped up. The instructor may have interrupted his plan, but she had also just given him the perfect opening. Max looked at him with what he thought might be a questioning expression. Do you want to see what's under my mask? Naruto repeated. Every youngling in the room instantly stared at him. Max suspected that Naruto was up to something, but for the life of her she couldn't figure out what it could be. Beneath my mask. Naruto's hand slowly rose to his face. His fellow initiates leaned in forward with anticipation. None of them could wait to see whatever mysteries lay beneath the time traveler's mask. Was he ugly? Was he scarred? Did he have some horrible disfigurement? Even Master Lean seemed entirely focused on him as he hooked his fingers over the cloth and pulled. Is another mask. Only to reveal another, identical mask, still covering his face. Most of the younglings gave out the strangled grunts of brutally murdered anticipation. Several actually fell down with shock. Master Lean just sighed. The matronly Jedi shook her head. That boy was definitely going to be a handful, she thought. Naruto laughed so hard he slipped off of the chair he had been standing on. With a dull thump, he landed on the floor, still cackling like a maniac with a caffeine addiction. It was only when a shadow fell over him that he managed to pull himself together and look up. Ahsoka was standing over him, giving him a flat look. You're pretty weird, you know that right? She said, before flashing him a mischievous grin. Let's be friends, okay? Okay, he said, smiling. Friends. While Naruto was entertaining his new clan mates with his antics, Jiraiya was settling into his new quarters. He wasn't very happy to be separated from his godson, but if this was the price he had to pay to secure their presence here, then he would count it as light indeed. He was roused from his thoughts by a chime from his door. "Come in," he said. The door hissed open to reveal Yoda standing there. The little goblin-esque master hobbled into his quarters and sat on a cushion in front of him. "Wish to speak with you, I do," Yoda said. "Much there is to tell, on both sides. What do you want to know?" Jiraiya asked, cautious of the ancient Jedi. "I told you most of what I could do. Left out nearly as much as you did," Yoda said, though there was no censure in his voice. "Trust each other fully, we do not. Earned, such trust is, amongst those like us." Jiraiya nodded slowly. He was not surprised that Yoda had discerned how much he had omitted from his demonstration earlier. The old Grandmaster had proven to be almost unnaturally perceptive. He supposed that having over 900 years of experience would lend a helping hand in that department. "Wish to examine the nature of this chakra, I do," Yoda continued. "Unlike any expression of the Force I have seen before it is. But first, tell you I will of some of the threats you may face. Open your eyes must be, in such times as we find ourselves in. These threats, they're the ones that you wanted to keep Naruto and I away from?" Jiraiya asked. "Yes. The Sith they are called," Yoda said, his voice now grim. "Ancient enemy of the Jedi, for many millennia they were. The dark side, anger, hate, greed, all of these and more are they. Nearly destroyed the Republic several times, they did. And now, returned they have." "You make them sound like bogeymen," Jiraiya said, grateful that Yoda was translating so he could use such descriptive language. "For 1,000 years, hidden they have been. Thought them dead we did. If revealed themselves to us now, they have, then close to their goals, they must be." "And what goals are those?" "Death," Yoda said, staring into Jiraiya's eyes. "Death of the Jedi. Death of the Republic. Death of freedom. Wish to rule the galaxy, always do they. If into their hands you fell, use your skills to do this they would. Allow this to happen, I will not. So that's why you agreed to have us trained, to keep us out of the Sith's grasp," Jiraiya said. "Well, as reasons go, I suppose it's not horrible." Yoda chuckled a bit at that, pleased that Jiraiya had understood the practical reasons behind Yoda's decision. He could tell that Jiraiya, behind his amiable, easygoing persona, was a skilled tactician, warrior, and soldier. While Yoda did not like the idea of the Jedi needing such skills, his vision had left him worried that those skills would come in handy soon. Hence, he was extending a branch of trust. A reason they were. The only reason, they were not. But enough of such talk. Time for that later there will be. For now, examine your powers, may I? Jiraiya considered the request for a long few moments, but eventually nodded his assent. Yoda had trusted him with what was clearly sensitive information, and after less than a day of knowing each other, he supposed he could trust the venerable Jedi to prod around his chakra coils, trying to figure out how they worked. After all, he mused, trust was what bonds were built on. And bonds between people were the foundations of peace. Just because he was in a new time, didn't mean he had given up on his mission to bring peace. Chapter 7. Anakin Skywalker was feeling emotional. To be fair, this was not an especially rare occurrence, much to the apparent displeasure of his master. In this case, however, Anakin had an especially good reason for his moodiness. The recent mission to Mawan had been stressful. To start with, encountering Granta Omega had most definitely not been part of the mission plan. That had been an extremely unpleasant surprise, and one they had all been lucky to survive. Master Yaddle in particular had mentioned that she likely would have died were it not for the visions granted by that wave in the Force, and therein lay the source of Anakin's present ill temper. Yaddle had not been the only one to see glimpses of the future in the aftermath of that massive shift. Anakin had also had a vision, and not one he had liked. It had mostly been a jumble. Anakin was still relatively inexperienced with the Force, and as such most of the vision had been little more than a series of dizzying images that gave a general impression of some coming darkness. One part of the vision, however, had been crystal clear. His mother's death. He had seen it a dozen different ways. Each time, she was on Tatooine, walking in the desert. In some scenarios she was attacked by Tuskens. In others, criminals from Jabba's gang ran her down. In still others she simply collapsed, lost in the Dune Sea, dying of thirst. He hadn't told Obi-Wan. Not yet. He didn't know how to even begin talking about it. He didn't want to admit, even to himself, that there was a chance those visions might be real. That would mean his mother was going to die, and that wasn't something that Anakin was prepared to even consider. Amidst Anakin's inner turmoil, the door to their quarters chimed. Shaking himself from his dark thoughts, Anakin stood up and walked to the door. Upon opening it, he was met, not with Obi-Wan as he had expected, but with Master Yoda. What was the Grand Master of the Jedi Order doing at his door? "Ah, greetings, young Skywalker," Yoda said. "May I come in?" "Oh, of course, Master," Anakin answered. "Master Obi-Wan isn't here though. He went to the gardens to meditate." "Fine, this is you it was that I came to see." "Me?" Anakin asked. That didn't make sense. He was just a Padawan. A skilled and powerful Padawan if he said so himself, but a Padawan nonetheless. Besides which, he had never thought Yoda liked him very much. Anakin knew Yoda had opposed him being trained in the first place. Aside from that, and a few lessons in council briefings, he had not really interacted much with the venerable Jedi. "Yes, you," Yoda said, smiling a bit. "Sit down, we should. Long, our conversation may be." Somewhat nervous, Anakin simply nodded and walked over to the small dining table. He sat in one chair, and Yoda deftly hopped into the one opposite. For a long moment, neither being spoke. Yoda sat calmly, while Anakin desperately tried to mask the storm of emotions in his mind. Finally, Yoda broke the silence. "An apology I owe you, Skywalker," he said. "An apology?" Anakin said, surprised. "You? What do you want? Unfairly have I treated you in the past," Yoda said, ignoring Anakin's obviously lost expression. "When first you came to this temple, criticize you I did, for your fear." "I remember," Anakin said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "Wrong was I to do that," Yoda admitted. "Because of your age, judge you I did, as I would a Jedi initiate. Unfair this was to you. When reject you I did, a hypocrite I was being." "What do you mean, Master?" Anakin asked. He was still trying to wrap his mind around what was happening right now. Even his inner turmoil was briefly put to one side in face of this seemingly impossible turn of events. "Criticize your fear, I did. And yet, my own fear it was, that led me to oppose your training," Yoda said, his eyes never once leaving Anakin's. "Your fear?" Anakin asked incredulously. "What could you have been afraid of?" "Of what you could become, if fell to the dark side you did," Yoda said, his ears drooping slightly. "Allowed this mere possibility to blind me to the truth, I did. For that, sorry am I." Anakin's mind seemed to have given up for the moment. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Grand Master was apologizing? To him? He couldn't count the number of times he had dreamed of proving that the council had been wrong to reject him. Now, here was Yoda, calmly admitting that very thing. "Master, why are you telling me this?" Anakin asked. "Because into the Order, 2 new students have been admitted," he said. "Older than you were, both of them are. During the debate on accepting them, realized that unfair I had been. Too much weight I gave to your age. Successful you have been, despite that. If a mistake one makes, fix it one should. In this case, an apology, all I can offer it is." "I thank you, Master," he said. "I accept your apology." Anakin's heart and head secretly swelled a little at hearing Yoda acknowledge his success as a Padawan. Oftentimes it had felt as if it was only Chancellor Palpatine who recognized just how hard he worked and how far he had come. Obi-Wan noticed it sometimes too, but not as often as Anakin felt he should have. The thought of Obi-Wan sent his mind back to the visions he hadn't told him about. He was still very reluctant to talk about them, but he did have the wisest Jedi in the galaxy sitting across from him. If anyone could give him answers, Yoda could. "Master Yoda, before you go, could I ask you something?" Anakin said hesitantly. Always willing to help, I am." "Your question, what is it?" "It's about the disturbance in the Force from a month or so ago," Anakin said. "I had some sort of vision after it happened. This vision, trouble you it does, Yoda said, closing his eyes. Much confusion and uncertainty I sense from you. See what did you, in this vision? It was about my mother, Master. I saw her die. Careful of your feelings you must be, young Skywalker. Uncertain, visions often are. Calm one must be, to interpret them. Fear of the future, not the Jedi way this is, Yoda said gently. I know, Master, but, she's my mother, Anakin said helplessly. He expected another lecture on attachments to come from Yoda. What he got instead surprised him. It seemed to be the theme of the evening. Share this vision with me, Will? Together, see something we may, that alone you missed, Yoda offered. The boy's obvious attachment to his mother concerned him, but now was not the time for that. The woman was still an innocent, and Anakin thought she might be in danger. Blinking numbly, Anakin could only nod his assent. Yoda reached across the table and took his hands, before closing his eyes and breathing deeply. Anakin followed suit, and allowed the old master to guide him into a deep meditation. They sank quickly into the currents of the Force, much more quickly than Anakin had ever managed before. For perhaps the first time, he truly gained an appreciation of just how large the gap between Yoda's skills and his own truly was. It seemed 900-something years of training gave one a rather formidable edge. Anakin couldn't help but promise himself that he would one day reach this level of mastery. As they sank into the Force, Yoda guided the meditation towards Anakin's memories. Gently, so as not to see anything he was not welcome to, he reached for the young Padawan's memories of his recent vision. As soon as he found it, Yoda carefully brought it to the surface so he could experience it for himself. As Skywalker had said, the vision showed his mother's death. Over a dozen different scenarios of it played across Yoda's inner eye. However, Yoda was not the Grandmaster of the Jedi Order for nothing. Peering past the crystal-clear images of Shmi's death, he noticed something Skywalker had missed in the murky swarm of visions behind them. There was a vision where Shmi lived. Yoda could not tell for how long, or in what way, but it clearly showed her alive beyond the point of the other visions. Crucially, it also showed her not on Tatooine. Every instance of her death had her on the barren desert planet, but not this one. Here she was elsewhere, a city, though Yoda could not tell where. He could feel Skywalker's shock and elation, as he too saw this new possibility. The boy was so incredibly emotional, but also so determined to help people. It was a dangerous combination. It could lead him to ruin, but it could just as easily drive him to become one of the greatest Jedi the galaxy had ever seen, Yoda reminded himself. Just as with Naruto, Anakin's fate was not yet determined. Rising from the meditation, Yoda opened his eyes. He could see Skywalker blinking across from him. The boy shook off his disorientation quickly, and asked him the question that was burning in his mind. Master Yoda, what does this mean? Anakin's voice was desperate and raw. Rarely clear, visions are. But these, obvious their meaning is, Yoda said, watching the boy perk up at what he was implying. Remain on Tatooine, your mother cannot. For her, only death waits there. So we're going to rescue her, right, Master? Anakin asked, bouncing in his seat from excitement. Send a mission to bring her to Coruscant, I will. Work here, there will be for her. But on that mission, you cannot go, Yoda said firmly. But why not? Anakin asked, a little heat creeping into his voice. She's my mother. She needs me. In this matter, compromised your judgment is. This is why, strive to avoid attachments, Jedi do. But of course, I'm attached to her, Master, Anakin cried indignantly. She's my mother. Know this I do. Judge you for it right now, I will not. But on this mission, clear heads will be needed. Trust, you must, that safely brought here, your mother will be. Anakin deflated somewhat at that. Yoda's tone was calm, but utterly unyielding. There would clearly be no negotiations on this. Besides, the old master brought up some good points. He was emotional about this, and he had seen how that could screw him over in the past. Sighing, he bowed his head. Of course, Master. I apologize for my outburst, he said. Forgiven, you are. One last thing there is. A request I have for you, Yoda said, waving aside Anakin's rudeness with a smile. What do you need me to do, Master? one of the new initiates, into the Clawmouse clan he has been placed. A boy of 12 he is, and new to the galaxy. Befriend him, I would have you. No, you do, the struggles he will face here. Help him, as helped you should have been. With that done, Yoda slid off the chair and onto the floor. Calling his Jimmer stick over to him, he walked out the door. Anakin was left gaping, trying to figure out what exactly had just happened, while at the same time feeling lighter and more at peace than he had in months. Naruto was feeling frustrated. He often felt frustrated when he was trying to learn something new, but this was especially bad. His mind just couldn't quite seem to grasp what it was that Yoda was telling him to do. It had been 2 days since he had joined the Clawmouse clan. He had fit in quickly, despite being one of the oldest ones there. Unlike him, the rest of the clan was made up of younglings who had been brought to the temple in the same year. The others' ages ranged from Vair, who was nearly 20 months younger than him, to Barris, who was his age, to Farron Bar, a Malik Tochi who was several months older than him. Even the younger ones proved to be remarkably mature for their age, nothing like the snot-nosed kids he had experience with back home. Of course, some of those snot-nosed kids had also been his friends, he thought, an image of Konohamaru rising in his mind. He fought down the wave of grief that came with it and focused his thoughts on his new friends. Ahsoka especially was great to hang out with. Despite being 18 months younger than him, she had quickly proved to be more than able to keep up. She had demonstrated that despite her age and size, she was perfectly capable of being really scary when she wanted to be. They had become fast friends, and were already planning several pranks to be executed in the coming weeks. It should be noted that Naruto's definition of maturity when it came to kids was somewhat different from the common consensus. He mainly defined it by a willingness and a capability to help him with pranks, and to kick butt if needed. Wandering, your mind is, a voice broke into his musings. Focused you must be, if to succeed at this you are. Yes, master. Sorry, came Naruto's somewhat sheepish reply. Yoda was sitting directly across from him in the small meditation room. The master was on a slightly elevated mat, putting him at eye level with his latest pupil. Yoda had decided that after a couple days to settle in, it was time to teach Naruto how to touch the Force like a Jedi. This was easier said than done. While the chakra of the shinobi was an expression of the Force, it was one of the most unusual and specialized that Yoda had ever seen. Chakra, as Yoda had discovered after a long talk with Jiraiya, was the Force being channeled into a being's body and forcibly merged with their own physical energy, their life's essence. When a shinobi used a jutsu, they were essentially using the Force to drain some of their own energy, and using the resulting mix to generate the technique. This was why manipulating the elements was so much easier with jutsu. The added physical energy of the shinobi's body helped manipulate the physical world far more readily than the Force alone. It also explained why genjutsu, which were far more akin to traditional Force techniques, were said to require more spiritual energy and less physical. It was essentially the shinobi accidentally using more of just the Force rather than mixing it with their own life essence. The entire thing was fascinating, and it opened up all sorts of interesting avenues that Yoda had every intention of exploring later. For now though, Naruto needed to learn how to feel the Force like a Jedi did. And that meant undoing years of prior training, not to mention several millennia of cultural memory. All of which led to the very frustrated young boy sitting across from him, trying to meditate. I don't get it, Master Yoda, said boy cried out after a few minutes. This just doesn't work. What am I doing wrong? Look outside yourself, you must, Yoda said calmly. Your way, focused inward it is. Missing the greater truth of the Force you are. What do you mean? Naruto asked. Through the Force, everything is connected, Yoda replied. As a Jedi, sense the world around us we can. The past, the present, even the future, yes. Allow the Force to flow through you, you must. Quiet your mind. Beyond the physical you must look. Ha! Naruto said intelligently. That last bit didn't make any sense. Show you it then, I will, Yoda said. Relax your mind. With that, he reached out with the Force to Naruto, feeling for his mind. It sparkled and burst with energy, a storm of thoughts and emotions that swirled about in an unfocused mess. It was no wonder the boy found this so hard. His energy levels rivaled those of a caffeinated loafcat. Yoda would have to teach him moving meditation soon. Sadly, that wouldn't do for this. Putting that thought aside, Yoda located Naruto's chakra network. It felt so foreign to the old master, seeing the force locked inside of someone like that. It looked so cut off, so incomplete. Reaching further, Yoda grasped the boy's actual force presence with his own. With great care, he delicately separated it from the physical energy that formed the other half of chakra. He then guided it outside of Naruto's body, and allowed it to join with the larger field of the force. Naruto gasped. He had felt an odd sensation when Yoda was doing whatever he had been doing. It had felt almost like he was trying to cast a genjutsu, but it had actually worked. All of a sudden, the universe seemed to open up in front of him. He could feel everything around him, from Yoda's shining presence, to the dim flickers of people on speeders outside. It wasn't just their presence either. He could feel their emotions, the shape of their minds. He felt connected to everything and everyone. He thought it might have been the most amazing experience of his entire life. "Wow," he said. "This is incredible. It's like being friends with everyone around me." Yoda grinned widely at that. It was perhaps the best description of feeling the force he had ever heard. It was truly a privilege to watch someone touch the force for the first time, especially when they were old enough to properly express their feelings. "Good," he said. "Now, focus you must on the world around you. Stop helping you, I now will." Naruto could feel Yoda's power withdraw. Instantly, maintaining the feeling of connection to the world beyond his body became nearly impossible. His instincts rebelled against this unusual usage of his energy, and he had to struggle not to immediately return his spiritual energy, no, his force presence, he reminded himself, back to his chakra coils. He managed to keep his hold on the force for a few seconds, before it slipped away from him. "Damn it," he cursed. "I can't do it without you helping me." "Calm yourself, Naruto," Yoda said. "Held on for several seconds you did. Old habits we are fighting, and any progress, impressive it is. Know what you are searching for, you now do. Find it again, you can." Mollified at that, Naruto settled back down to try again. As he meditated, searching for the force, he found that Yoda was right. Having experienced what his goal actually felt like, he could feel when he was on the right track. It was like a warm light on his face, and he could feel when he turned towards it. It was still damnably tricky though. Yoda had to help him 3 more times before he managed to find it on his own. Even then, he was still only able to maintain the connection for a little over half a minute before his focus slipped. As soon as it did, he instinctively reverted to old habits and channeled the force's chakra again. Once Naruto had managed to touch the force a half dozen more times on his own. Yoda dismissed him. "Know what you must do, you do now. With time, come to you naturally it will," he said. "Do you think I'll ever be able to use the force and chakra at the same time, master?" Naruto asked with an eager look in his eyes. "When use chakra you do, using the force you are. Different sides of the same object they are. Using them together, not so hard it will be. Only practice will it take. In time, show other Jedi how to channel the force's chakra you may. A new field of study for the order it could become." "Awesome. I'm gonna go show Ahsoka and the others what I learned. Thanks, Master Yoda." With that, Naruto rushed off, eager to impress his new friends. Yoda was left in the meditation chamber, smiling at the boy's seemingly unquenchable enthusiasm. As he watched Naruto leave, his face turned pensive. Naruto's power in the Force had impressed him. It was hard to sense normally, bound up in his body as it was. When Yoda had freed it though, it had glowed like an exploding star. The boy would eventually rival Skywalker in power. Darth Sidious was furious. This was unusual, as he typically held his emotions under tight control. Anger and hatred were tools of the Sith, it was true. However, his position was far too delicate for him to indulge in wild impulses. Nevertheless, his anger persisted. The cause of it was quite simple, but no less infuriating for that. The cursed Jedi had brought 2 new players onto the board. This was the absolute last thing he wanted. His plans were practically racing to fruition, the work of 1,000 years was nearly complete. Now was not the time for the unexpected. It had started with the mysterious shift in the Force a month ago. Sidious was lucky that he had been in this very chamber at the time, hidden deep within the undercity of Coruscant. Every conceivable protection was applied to it, both technological and force-based. As such, when the wave hit and his barriers slipped, he was safe from detection. The wave had damaged the veil that he and his old master had crafted to blind the Jedi to the future. The damage would take months, possibly even years to fully repair, though it should not affect the timeline of his plans too much. The more troublesome thing had come afterwards. The future had changed. It was obvious then and even more obvious now. Perhaps the most blatant example was the continued existence of Master Yaddle. Sidious actually snarled at that. The sanctimonious old goblin bitch had been supposed to die on Mawan. He had seen it in the Force. He had even discreetly helped fund Granta Omega's research to ensure that it would come to pass. And yet, still she lived. To compound matters, Sidious had been utterly unable to investigate the source of the disturbance. He had known the wave originated from Tython, but he had no options for going there. Chancellor Palpatine could not get away for the weeks it would take to navigate there and back, let alone the time it would take to search the planet. His new apprentice, Dooku, was equally busy, laying the groundwork for his coming plans. The man's task was far too critical to be abandoned now. None of his other agents were even capable of navigating to Tython. Sidious cursed himself for not preparing more Force-sensitive tools for himself. Maul had proven himself immensely useful up until his death, and Sidious was feeling the lack of such an agent now. He would have to begin training some soon. Tyrannus could assist in that as well, he thought. When the Jedi had returned, he had naturally received word of it almost immediately. Spying within the Jedi Temple was near impossible, but he had little need to do so. As Supreme Chancellor, Palpatine was told of the unusual occurrence within a day by a well-meaning Jedi. What he had heard had shocked Sidious to his core. The Jedi had found 2 relics from the distant past. 2 Force-sensitive humans who had apparently been held in stasis somehow for 50,000 years. Sidious had no doubt that these 2 were the cause of the disturbance, and the thrice-damned changes to the future. This was hardly the first time the future had changed during Sidious's life. However, in the past the changes had been minor, trifling things. The future had still led inevitably to his ultimate victory over the Jedi. The success of the plan had been assured. This time, however, it was different. For the first time since Sidious had first seen the future, there was uncertainty. There were options now, other paths that he could not see clearly. His ascent was no longer the absolute certainty that it had been. A wisp of genuine fear curdled in Sidious's stomach at that thought, the first such feeling since he became a Sith. Snarling, he squashed the fear with anger. He was a Sith Lord, the only true Sith Lord in the galaxy. Fear was for lesser beings than he. He would have to meditate later, to regain his control. Now, though, there was the matter of what to do about these newcomers. Sidious could not risk trying to befriend them as Palpatine. His friendship with Skywalker was pushing it as it was, trying the same with these 2 would attract attention he could not afford. No, for now they were untouchable, much as Sidious hated to admit it. The temple was too full of Jedi and too well guarded for an attack, and as initiates they would not leave it for some time. He would wait, Sidious decided, until these 2 became Padawans. Then he would see about eliminating them. If, somehow, they survived, perhaps they would be worth trying to turn. Failing that, then he was confident they would die with the rest of the Jedi when the time came. All Sidious had to do was continue laying the groundwork for Skywalker's fall and the Jedi's destruction. Reining in his emotions once more, Sidious prepared to resume the mask of Palpatine. He had much to do, after all. There was still a republic to run, Sidious thought, if only for now. It was 3 days after his talk with Master Yoda that Anakin first encountered Naruto. He hadn't meant to. He was still mulling over whether or not he wanted to meet the boy at all. Yoda had asked him to more or less take the boy under his wing, and Anakin wasn't sure he wanted to do that. He was also waiting for news of his mother. Yoda had told him that a Jedi team had been sent to get her, but so far there had been no news. It seemed the Force had other plans, however, as when Anakin wandered into one of the engineering labs one afternoon, he found a masked blonde boy trying, and utterly failing, to disassemble a mouse droid. "What are you doing, kid?" Anakin asked. Anyone would think you've never even held a Hydra spanner before. I haven't, Naruto answered shortly. He wasn't in the mood to deal with teasing right now. What do you mean you haven't? You should have learned that in your basic engineering. Anakin trailed off as understanding began to dawn on him. You're Naruto Uzumaki, aren't you? The new initiate, he asked. Yep, Naruto said as he kept struggling with the droid. What's your name? I'm Anakin Skywalker. Look, would you put that down? It's painful to watch. Anakin said, his engineering sensibilities crying out at Naruto's fumbling attempts to use the tool. It was apparently the wrong thing to say, as Naruto angrily threw both the droid and the Hydra spanner onto the table. There, is that better? Naruto growled, his frustration getting the better of him. I'd never even heard of any of this crap until like a month and a half ago, so I don't need you telling me how much I suck, okay? I was just no, you're right, Anakin said contritely. That was rude of me. Do you want some help with this stuff? Droids are sort of my thing. Naruto instantly brightened at that, his eyes crinkling as he grinned beneath his mask. You'd help me. Really? That would be great, he said happily. Anakin frowned internally at that, even as he moved to start showing the kid how basic tools worked. Naruto had been a little too surprised and a little too happy that someone would offer him help. Anakin recognized that behavior. He had seen it in himself and his fellow slaves on Tatooine. Master Yoda's request was starting to make a bit more sense. After a few minutes of teaching Naruto how not to cut his fingers off with a plasma torch, Anakin decided to try and dig a little deeper into Naruto's story. He couldn't be direct about it though, he thought. The kid would probably clam up at direct questioning. He would have to be a bit more subtle than that. You know, I was older than normal when I came to the temple too, Anakin said. Oh yeah? How old were you? Naruto asked, still concentrating on his tools. I was 9. Master Kagan rescued me from slavery on Tatooine and brought me here. The council didn't accept me at first, but Master Obi-Wan talked them into it, Anakin replied, eyeing Naruto's reaction carefully. You were a slave? Naruto said slowly, disgust filling his voice. There's slavery in the galaxy? Not in the Republic, at least not really, Anakin said. Out in hot space, or in the far outer rim, well, things can get pretty bad. That must have been horrible, Naruto said. Yeah, it wasn't too great, Anakin said, before carefully phrasing his next sentence. I'm guessing you didn't have such a great childhood either, did you? Naruto jerked a bit at that, and looked up sharply. How did you dash? Your reaction when I offered you help, Anakin answered. It takes one to know one. So, do you want to talk about it? Did you? Naruto asked bitterly. No, Anakin admitted. But I probably should have. You shouldn't let that stuff just sit and fester. At least, that's what my master says, and he's pretty wise. Naruto was quiet for a while, seemingly deep in thought. Finally, after Anakin thought he might have withdrawn into himself, he started to talk. It was slow at first, hesitant and a little nervous. As he kept going though, he grew more confident. The whole time Anakin listened, occasionally offering bits of advice on the droid. When Naruto paused, Anakin began speaking, telling a few tales of his own less than stellar boyhood. So it went, with the two of them trading stories and jokes, heedless of the hours passing. It wasn't until Naruto looked down and saw that he had not only disassembled, but also successfully reassembled the mouse droid, that he became cognizant of how late it was. He ran off to bed, but not before Anakin promised to help him with engineering again the next day. As Naruto sprinted away down the hall, Anakin sat back and sighed. He still wasn't sure how he felt about this. He was hardly someone that should be giving personal advice. But, he thought ruefully, he was still going to come back tomorrow and do the same thing all over again. He smirked a little at that. Master Yoda was cleverer than he had given him credit for. Chapter 8. Okay, seriously Naruto, where are we going? Ahsoka whispered. You'll see, he responded. I found something cool, just follow me. Ahsoka rolled her eyes at the non-answer, but she followed her friend nonetheless. In the 4 months she had known him, Naruto had never lied to her. If he said he had something cool to show her, then she was willing to bet it would be worth sneaking out of the creche in the early hours of the morning. The rule breaking didn't bother her as much as the unexpected wake up had. Naruto had pulled any number of pranks since he had arrived, and she had been an eager participant in many of them. They offered a welcome respite from the somewhat stuffy atmosphere that normally pervaded the temple, not to mention how oddly instructive she had found them. Naruto had a talent for mischief that boggled the mind. Indeed, it was only those fond memories that had saved Naruto from a pillow in the face when he had pulled her out of bed at 0400. That was just too early for normal people to be up and moving, let alone wandering in some deep section of the temple she had never even been to before. Still, she smiled a bit as she recalled how he had practically vibrated with excitement when he told her to get ready. Whatever this was, it must have been really cool. Okay, we're here, Naruto's voice broke her from her reverie. Peering past him, she saw an ancient-looking door, rusted halfway open. Beyond it lay an unlit corridor, with its dust-covered walls and floor rapidly vanishing into the gloom. It didn't look like anyone had been down there in centuries. It also did not look like something worth waking early for. Turning back towards Naruto, she gave him a look that would have kept meat fresh for a month. "Did you seriously bring me all the way down here to look at some old door?" she hissed. Her voice promised imminent suffering if he didn't provide an adequate explanation. No, he said, before continuing rapidly. "It's not just any old door. That's an entrance to the old tunnels that run beneath the temple. I read in the archives that there are tons of old tunnels from thousands of dash." Wait, Ahsoka interrupted. "You read something?" "You? Hey!" Naruto said indignantly. I read all the time. You just don't see me do it, that's all. So, you had one of your clones do it for you then?" Ahsoka said, giving him a knowing look. "Maybe. But that doesn't matter." Sure, she said. "So what's so cool about these tunnels then?" "They're completely unexplored," Naruto said, jumping with excitement. "We get to be the first people to go in there in over 1,000 years. Think of all the stuff we could find. We can even map them out, and use that for our history project." Ahsoka blinked at that information. Exploring creepy ancient tunnels, with the outside chance of cool loot and the possibility of an easy time on a class paper. That was more like it. Why didn't you just say so at the start? Ahsoka asked. "Come on, let's hurry. We've only got a little over an hour before we have to head back, or Master Liam will catch us." "Bet you can't catch me." With that, she pulled out her flashlight and raced off into the tunnel laughing. Naruto swore and chased after her. No way was he going to let a challenge like that just pass him by. The tunnel echoed with the sounds of their laughter as Naruto chased after his friend. Despite her head start though, he soon caught up with her. His speed was still well above the standard for mere initiates after all. As he drew level with the orange-skinned girl, he tapped her on the shoulder to let her know she had lost. They both slowed to a walk, kicking up little plumes of dust off the floor. "Ah man," Ahsoka complained as she panted lightly. "I forgot how fast you are. And you're not even out of breath. How do you do that?" "I've always had good stamina," Naruto bragged. "And Jiraiya-sensei makes sure I stay in top shape. He says that just because we're in the order now doesn't mean we should let our standards drop." "You two are crazy," Ahsoka said, shaking her head. She had joined in on one of Jiraiya and Naruto's workouts. Just one. She had actually lasted for more than half of it, but she'd felt like dying for the next 2 days. It had inspired her to increase her physical training, but she knew she was still a long way from matching the two former shinobi. Despite being one of the youngest members of the Clawmouse clan, she had always been the top scorer on physical tests. It had been a little disheartening to be shown just how far she had yet to go. Naruto seemed to pick up on her thoughts, and bumped her lightly with his shoulder. "Hey," he said, "you'll get there soon enough. You're already a lot faster and stronger than when we met. I believe in you, Ahsoka. You're pretty awesome after all." Ahsoka smiled at that. It was seemingly impossible to be sad or down on yourself near Naruto. He had a way of sensing it, and then saying just the right thing to bring you out of your funk. "Thanks, Naruto," she said. "You're pretty awesome yourself." "I know," he said, crossing his arms behind his head. Ahsoka rolled her eyes. Just when he started sounding all cool and wise, he would go and say something like that. Ahsoka would bet money that under his mask, he had a smug grin from ear to ear. "Space brain," she said, smiling. "Slowpoke," he responded. "Motormouth." "Shrimp." Together they walked down the tunnel bickering and trading insults good-naturedly. Neither was not worried about getting lost. Ahsoka used a basic Jedi cantrip to commit every turn to memory, and Naruto trusted her implicitly to lead them back out. She had saved his butt from getting lost in the temple several times before. As they wandered deeper, the walls began to change. Numerous carvings adorned them, showing what appeared to be Jedi in various poses. Some were meditating, others flying ships, and still others were battling various foes. "This area must once have been used for training," Ahsoka said, her voice awed. "Those look like Jedi fighting Mandalorians on the wall." "That would make those carvings over 4,000 years old." "Yeah, I think we're under the processional way," Naruto said. The archive said that most of that block used to be an active part of the temple. It wasn't well known outside of the order, but the vast tower block the famous temple sat upon was also technically part of the temple. Most of the space was now taken up either by the sacred spire or by various machines and utilities that provided utilities and services to the Senate district, but large parts of old Jedi structures still survived. "Look at you, being all scholarly again," Ahsoka teased. "Master Nu would be so proud." Naruto opened his mouth to retort, but a sudden noise from ahead of them silenced his comeback. It sounded like something with claws scrabbling across the floor. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his old training taking over. As he glided noiselessly across the dust, a faint, animal whine came from the shadows. "It sounds like an animal," Ahsoka said. "Let's check it out." "Okay, but be careful," Naruto said. "It could be dangerous." The sounds got louder as they moved forward. They both crept up slowly, not wanting to startle an unknown creature. When he judged they were right around the corner from it, Naruto signaled. Together they jumped around the corner, ready to face whatever was making the noise. There in front of them, with a wide mouth full of teeth and beady black eyes was. "It's a loafcat," Ahsoka said. "Oh, it's so cute." Ahsoka, care to fill me in here?" Naruto asked. He gathered that the thing, whatever it was, wasn't dangerous. His education had not, thus far, covered what a loafcat was though. "It's a harmless animal from Lothal. This one must be an escaped pet," she said. "And look, it's injured." It was indeed injured, Naruto saw. Its back left leg was bleeding, and it held it at an angle off the ground. Kneeling down, Naruto slowly approached to get a better look. "It looks like it got bit by something," he said. "It must have run in here to get away. Let's help it out." Naruto reached into the pouch he kept tied around his leg. Slowly he withdrew his medkit and opened it up. The black-haired loafcat hissed at his movement and tensed, ready to flee. Naruto stopped, before carefully reaching for the frightened animal. "Whoa, easy there," he said as he scratched the lost pet behind the ears. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The loafcat purred with satisfaction for a few seconds, before making a spirited attempt to strip the flesh from his hand. "Egg, shit!" Naruto swore. The loafcat yowled and ran off down the tunnel. "I thought you said those things were harmless," he yelled at Ahsoka. "It's just scared," she said defensively. "Now come on, we have to catch it." "You want to go after that thing," Naruto said incredulously. "It'll die if we don't help it," Ahsoka yelled out, already chasing off after the black-furred animal. "Now come on." Naruto sighed and swore under his breath, but he gave chase after her. Ahsoka loved animals. If he didn't help her with this, she would give him grief about it for weeks. As it was, they were already going to be late for the morning roll call with Master Leem. She was going to give them the look when they got back. Naruto shivered as he ran. He hated and dreaded the look. Every member of the Clawmouse clan did. It was one of Master Leem's most powerful means of keeping order. It wasn't that it was especially angry or fearsome. It was not at all threatening. It was actually quite calm and cool. You just didn't want to see it again. Naruto shook off his trepidation and refocused on the loafcat as he caught up to Ahsoka. Together they managed to herd it into a dead end. Once again moving slowly, they walked towards the hissing feline. This time, Ahsoka held the frightened animal while Naruto cleaned and bandaged the wound. Within 5 minutes he was done, and Ahsoka picked the now calm animal up into her arms. Smiling, she held him out to Naruto. "See," she said, "he's harmless. He was just frightened, that's all." No sooner had she said those words than the creature took a swipe at Naruto's masked face with its paws, yowling madly. "Aha," he said flatly. "I'll let you carry him out of here. Now come on, we're super late for dash." Creak. The sudden sound had both initiates immediately on the alert, but it was too late. With a groaning crash, the floor beneath their feet gave way, sending them hurtling down into the darkness. Together, boy, girl, and madly screeching Lothcat, they plummeted through what looked like an old garbage chute. It looked that way because that's exactly what it was, not that any of the three were in a position to appreciate that. The chute slowly changed directions, until they were sliding at a steep angle down one of the sides rather than free falling. Given the accumulated muck and filth that had built up on the chute wall over the centuries, it was a toss-up if this was an improvement or not. Any hopes they had of sliding to a gentle, or at least survivable stop, were dashed when the chute suddenly dumped them out into the open air. They were once again falling, this time between two enormous cliffs of metal and duracrete. They were between the sides of two buildings, Ahsoka idly thought, in the small part of her brain that was not panicking. Fortunately, this was not the first time Naruto had found himself an unwilling recipient of gravity's tender care. Angling his body, he maneuvered over towards Ahsoka, who was remarkably calm given her present circumstances. He hooked one arm around her waist and pulled her towards him. "Hang on to me," he shouted over the powerful winds. "No shit," came Ahsoka's rather strained response. Nevertheless, she moved herself onto his back. With her arms full of Lothcat, she wrapped her legs around Naruto's torso and clung on for dear life. That done, Naruto moved on to step 2 of his hasty plan. He bit his thumb to draw blood, before flashing through hand signs. Channeling the force as chakra, he thrust his hand into the air below them. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. Poof! A massive cloud of smoke appeared, and the trio felt their fall rapidly slow to a stop. When the smoke cleared, it revealed a massive blue-green toad beneath them, all 4 limbs spread out to dig into the 2 walls on either side of them. Judging by the furrows carved in the duracrete, it had taken some force to halt their momentum. "Jiraiya, is that you?" came a polite voice from beneath them, speaking in Nihongo. "No, it's Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said in the same language. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. What's your name?" "I am Gamahiro." "It is nice to meet you, Naruto-san, though perhaps your choice of venue could use some work." At this point Ahsoka's mind finally caught up with the fact that she wasn't falling anymore. The reason for that was something that she was still trying to process, but she figured it was Naruto's fault. This seemed like a reasonable assumption, as most of the weirdness in her life was his fault, she thought as she got off Naruto's back and stood up. After all, he was currently chatting amiably in Nihongo with whatever it was that had saved them. "Okay, hold up," she said as calmly as she could, which wasn't very. "Naruto, you want to fill me in here? What is this thing, and how did it just appear out of nowhere?" "Oh, right, you don't know about the Toads yet," Naruto said. "This is Gamahiro, a member of the Toad Clan. I have a contract with them, so I was able to summon him with a jutsu." Ahsoka nodded her head numbly at that. She hadn't understood most of what her friend had said, but she gathered that the giant toad was friendly and somehow knew Naruto. Given that it was also the only thing standing between them and certain death, she was not inclined to question it further. Thank you, Gamahiro-san," she said in her very limited Nihongo. Naruto had started teaching it to the clan, but progress had been slow. "You are welcome, young lady. Naruto, I will not be able to get you back up higher. The walls are too far apart up there. The best I can do is get you 2 to the ground safely." "That's alright, Gamahiro, we'll figure it out," Naruto said. "Very well then. Hold on tight." Naruto grabbed Ahsoka, who was still carrying the demented cat he noted, and pinned her to the toad's head. He then used chakra to stick himself over her, like a seatbelt of sorts. Once he had done so, Gamahiro pushed off of one wall, and slid down the other with all 4 limbs. He then bounced from one wall to the next, maintaining a safe speed as he descended into the gloom below. At the same time as this was happening, Jiraiya was walking to one of the temple's gyms for an early morning workout. He had been an early riser for decades now, and he often took advantage of this fact to get to the gym before anyone else. Today, however, it seemed that someone had beaten even him there. It was a woman, quite an attractive one, if Jiraiya was any judge, being perhaps a year or two younger than he was. She was a Myriolan, with bright blue eyes, dark lips, and a series of small diamonds tattooed on her chin. She was currently dressed in comfortable black workout clothes, and was stretching on the edge of one of the mats. The habit of nearly 4 decades wanted Jiraiya to shamelessly ogle her body, but he dismissed it. He was not going to do that anymore. "Oh, hello," Jiraiya said. "I don't usually see other people here this early." "Yes, well, I've been on a mission for the last few months," the woman said. "I normally come here at this time. I'm Luminara Unduli, by the way." "Who might you be?" "I'm Jiraiya," he said. "Ah, one of the mysterious time travelers." "I must admit, I didn't quite believe it when I heard someone of your age had been admitted for training," Luminara said, a hint of challenge in her voice. Jiraiya smirked internally at that. She was testing him, he realized, seeing how he would react to being called out. She was hardly the first Jedi to do so. While everyone was willing to abide by the council's decision, that didn't mean they weren't going to see for themselves what the newcomer was like. "Well, the council voted on it," he said, keeping his face perfectly blank. "All I know is that some of the masters had visions that told them we had to become Jedi." "Indeed," she said. Her mouth twitched slightly, nearly forming a tiny smile. It seemed he had passed her test. "I've heard that you are quite the formidable warrior," she continued. "Would you care for a quick spar, just hand to hand? I would enjoy seeing how your style compares against my own." Jiraiya's internal smirk widened at that. Luminara practically radiated confidence and self-assurance. He could see it in her body language, and even feel it with his nascent force senses. If he had to guess, he would say that she had probably heard some of the stories about his skills from others, and assumed they were exaggerating. This would be interesting, he thought. "I'm up for it," he said, smiling lightly. "Just let me warm up first." After a few minutes of stretching and some light calisthenics, they both took the mat. They began circling one another, analyzing stances and searching for weakness. Before long though, Luminara shot forward. She opened with a flurry of attacks, aiming for his head and chest. Jiraiya was mildly impressed by her speed, but he was still easily able to dodge the opening volley. He weaved around each punch and kick until the last jab. That one he caught, before responding with a swift round kick to her stomach. As she doubled over, wheezing, he used his grip on her arm to throw her across the mat. "Impressive," she gasped as she returned to her feet, catching her breath. "I would hate to face you in a real fight." "My godson said something similar once," Jiraiya said, settling back into a ready stance as Luminara did the same. "Yes, Naruto, I believe his name is. I had heard that you two were close. That you were even still training him while he is here," she said. This time, the disapproval in her voice was plain to hear. "I take it you don't approve," Jiraiya said flatly, as he ducked beneath a sudden spin kick. "No, I don't," Luminara said, flipping over Jiraiya's head to attack from behind. "You two have a dangerous attachment. A Jedi should be free of such things. They lead to the dark side." Jiraiya actually laughed at this. He spun around her punch, still laughing, and delivered a quick jab to her ribs. She winced, before jumping backwards to gain space and plan her next move. "You know, you're the 17th Jedi who said that about Naruto and me. I'll tell you the same thing I told all of them." "And what would that be?" Luminara asked, before jumping to deliver an axe kick from above. "That the Jedi stance on attachments is wrong," Jiraiya said, blocking her kick and throwing her back. "It is just plain wrong. I can see where you all are coming from, and you aren't too far off, but you still missed the mark." "Interesting," Luminara remarked. "Are you going to stop holding back on me?" Jiraiya blinked a bit at that, nearly missing his next block. This woman was intriguing, he decided. "Well, if you think you can handle it," he said, smiling. "Oh, I insist," Luminara replied, drawing on the force to speed her reactions and sharpen her senses. With that, Jiraiya blurred into motion. Luminara was forced to strain her force senses to their limit just to dodge his blistering attacks. It was when she tried to block one that she made her first mistake. She grunted in pain as she felt the bones in her arm protest, nearly breaking with the force of his kick. She didn't get a chance to recover. Jiraiya took advantage of her brief moment of distraction and darted past her guard. A brutal knee to the stomach, followed by an equally brutal kick to the head, had Luminara flying across the room. She landed on the edge of the mat in a dazed heap, a bruise already spreading across her face. Fortunately, Jedi Masters recover quickly. By the time Jiraiya crossed over to where she lay, Luminara was already using the force to clear her head. She couldn't move just yet, but her awareness was returning. As that awareness expanded to include how much pain she was in, she decided that might not be a good thing. Still, she managed to focus on Jiraiya's somewhat concerned face hovering over her. "Are you all right?" Jiraiya asked. "That was quite a hit you just took." "I'll be fine," Luminara answered, wincing slightly as she sat up. "It seems I rather severely underestimated you. You have my apologies for that. It was arrogant of me." Jiraiya just brushed it aside. "Better find that out now than in the real world," he said. "Besides, you did pretty well. Not many people can dodge even one of my attacks at that speed." Luminara nodded her head, acknowledging the compliment. "Well, since it seems that my morning workout has ended a bit earlier than expected, would you care to join me for some teas?" she asked. "I would be interested to hear how exactly you think the Jedi Order's rules on attachments are flawed." Jiraiya found himself blinking in shock once again. This woman was proving to be very intriguing. "You're the first Jedi who's actually wanted to talk more on that subject after hearing me say they're wrong," he said. "Most either dismiss me as not seeing the truth yet, or else just avoid the topic altogether." "Well, you seem to have given the matter a great deal of thought," Luminara said. "I could sense that you weren't being arrogant or contrarian when you said it. You genuinely believe that the Jedi are wrong. I'm interested in knowing why." Jiraiya smiled widely and helped her to her feet. 15 minutes saw them showered, changed, and sitting in a small meditation room nearby. A pot of tea sat steaming between them as they talked. "So, what exactly is your issue with the Jedi's rules on attachments?" Luminara asked. "I think it's counterproductive to the Jedi's core mission of achieving and maintaining peace throughout the Republic," Jiraiya answered calmly. "The Jedi believe that attachments cloud one's judgment. A clear mind is necessary for ensuring peace. The decisions we make are too important for us to be blinded by emotions, especially those caused by attachments," Luminara stated firmly. "Let me ask you this, would you say the only way for people to be truly at peace is for them to understand one another?" Jiraiya asked. Luminara frowned thoughtfully for a few moments, mulling it over. Eventually she reached a conclusion. "I would agree with that. So then, as keepers of the peace, the Jedi should strive to understand as many of those around us as we can, yes?" "Yes. But isn't the best way to understand others to build bonds with them? Bonds of mutual trust and friendship." "Perhaps," Luminara admitted. "But those bonds should not progress to an emotional attachment to others. Such things cloud your judgment." Jiraiya sighed and resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "You're missing the point of having such attachments," he said. "What is it I'm missing then?" "That it's not about how those bonds affect you. It's about how you can affect those around you with those bonds. A Jedi's whole purpose is to have a positive impact on the galaxy, not to avoid letting the galaxy have a negative impact on them. By focusing on how we can help those we understand, those we are attached to, I think you'll find that your judgment remains remarkably clear." "That is an interesting point of view," Luminara said slowly. "I will have to think on it further. However, it does not change the danger of attachments. They can lead to fear, jealousy, and grief. All paths to the dark side." "You say that as though those emotions inevitably lead to falling," Jiraiya said. "Plenty of Jedi experience all of those emotions and more without falling. Plenty more could probably do so safely if the Order actually taught younglings how to properly handle and process emotion, rather than simply teaching them to suppress and dismiss their feelings. Besides, you're missing the core of the issue again." "Which is?" Luminara asked curiously. It had been a very long time since someone had challenged her beliefs in this way, if ever. She found the experience rather refreshing. "That not having any attachments can be every bit as bad as having them," Jiraiya said seriously. "Back home I had a teammate, Orochimaru. When we were young, he was a very kind, caring boy, a good person. After the Second Great War, though, he began to isolate himself, cutting himself off from his friends and colleagues, from his attachments. Eventually, he began to devalue the lives of those around him so much, he began experimenting on people. He murdered dozens, abandoned the village, and later tried to destroy it. Jedi do not devalue sentient lives, Luminara said sharply in response. No, they don't, Jiraiya conceded. But they do devalue sentient life. The emotions, the attachments, the love and happiness and grief, all the things that make us living instead of merely alive. You distance yourself from them, and by doing so you distance yourself from the very people we are sworn to protect and guide. Luminara was silent at that. She looked thoughtful for a long moment while she sipped her tea. She then poured herself another cup before refocusing on the conversation. I do not have an immediate comeback for that, she admitted, rather reluctantly. I do think that you are underestimating the risk the dark side poses, both to the Jedi and the galaxy as a whole. But I am eager to hear more of your thoughts on the matter. You have an unusual perspective. Jiraiya smiled, pouring himself another cup of tea. For the next few hours, he and Luminara sat and discussed more about the Jedi Code. He could practically hear the questions bubbling around in her mind. She was thinking about what he had said, which was good. Jiraiya truly didn't like the way most of the Jedi interpreted their code. It was heartening to have one of them actually listen to his words on the matter. Naruto wasn't sure how long Gamahiro was hopping between buildings on their way down to the ground, but it was a long time. Long enough for him to actually start getting bored of the sensation of plummeting into the unknown. Every time it seemed as if they had reached the ground, it turned out to be just another abandoned city level or building roof that they would then crash straight through. Only Gamahiro's extremely durable skin allowed him to escape unscathed. Eventually though, after what felt like days to Naruto, they did reach the ground. Or at least, a surface solid enough to take their weight, which Naruto figured was close enough. They weren't falling anymore at least. That was a plus, he figured. Naruto, a muffled voice said from beneath him. I think you can get off now. You're squishing me. Oh, right. Naruto picked himself up off of Ahsoka, who was looking somewhat ill. Her budding montrals were paler than normal, and her skin was more beige than orange. The evil Lothcat, he noted glumly, was still in her arms, alive and frozen in terror. Ahsoka groaned and stood up, swaying slightly on her feet. I think I'm gonna puke, she said. Naruto paled at that. He didn't even want to think about what the toads would do if he let someone puke on one of them. Not up here, you're not, he shouted, rushing over to her. Ahsoka groaned as he picked her up and slid down Gamahiro's back. As soon as they reached the floor, she pushed herself out of his arms, handed him the Lothcat, which promptly tried its level best to claw his face off, and gave her stomach contents a walk in the fresh air. Once Naruto had managed to pry the demented feline off his face and pinned it in his arms, he turned to face Gamahiro. The enormous toad was clearly exhausted. He was panting heavily, and dozens of small scratches littered his arms and legs. Jumping down from wall to wall for so long had obviously taken its toll. Thanks, Gamahiro. I'm sorry for summoning you like that. I promise I'll make it up to you as soon as I can. I was happy to assist, Naruto. However, I must return to Mte Mayaboku now. I need rest. I hope you are able to find your way back to the surface safely. Farewell. With that, Gamahiro vanished in a poof of white smoke. Naruto was suddenly very keenly aware of just how alone he, Ahsoka, and the evil cat were down here. Where did he go? Ahsoka asked, having regained control over her stomach. Naruto promptly passed the Lothcat back to her, whereupon it transformed into a calmly purring fluff ball. He had to go back to his home, Naruto said. He was too tired to stay here. Wherever here is. We're really far down, Naruto. I don't think people are supposed to go down this far, Ahsoka said, looking around. There was hardly any light, and what little there was illuminated nothing but piles of trash and debris. There were no signs of recent population. How far down do you think we are? Naruto asked, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Ahsoka said, her voice matching his. It should say on one of the buildings over there. Let's go look. Together they wandered over to the vast cliff of crumbling duracrete and metal that made up the sides of some ancient skyscraper. As they got closer, they could see a number, painted in yellow, almost illegible beneath the filth of centuries. When they got close enough to read what it was, their jaws dropped. "Well, we're fucked, aren't we?" Naruto asked numbly. Yeah, we are," Ahsoka replied. Both of them knew that the temple started on level 5000. The lowest inhabited level was officially level 125. The lowest level it was considered possible to inhabit was level 90, although very few sane people would ever choose to try. Hardly anyone ever returned after venturing below level 50, and the Republic didn't even bother mounting rescue missions for those poor fools that found themselves down that far. The number in front of them, however, said 1. They were on level 1. The very bottom. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.